Michael, thanks for taking some time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, is this going to be your first time to Idaho?
We've been in Idaho before, many times over the years, but I think this is the first time we've played Rexburg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'd imagine when you're traveling on these different concert stops, you probably don't have any time to do any sightseeing or anything like that.
Every now and then, so sometimes it takes so long and so much work to get out west. Sometimes if we have a couple shows out west with a small gap and then some more shows, we'll stay out there. So we actually did that one time in Twin Falls, Idaho. We call them grill and chills. We'll go park our bus in a campground or something and just kind of go sightseeing for a day or two. So we saw the waterfalls out there and stuff. So just usually it's out west. We get days off on the road where it's kind of like that. Otherwise, if it's close enough to home, we'll just drive home. But um, yeah, we love Idaho. It's beautiful country. We've been up to Sun Valley and Twin Falls, Coeur d'Alene. We've been kind of all around Boise, Pocatello. We've done a lot of Idaho shows over the years.
So, now do you have any ties to Idaho?
Not really. My wife's family is from Washington State, so that's as close as I get to having ties there.
You guys have a concert performance coming up June 15th at BYU Idaho in Rexburg,
Yeah.
which we will talk about. But I know part of the reason for this tour is your new album.
We have a new album called 10 to 1. We basically went in and reimagined our 10 number one songs as if we were putting an album together today of these songs. You know, how would we record them, knowing what we know from our experience and how the recording styles and things have changed over the years. So we kind of just wanted to create an album as if we just were putting out all those songs on one album together. So they have kind of a cohesive feel, and they're still recognizable. You know, we're not going to throw people for a loop on most of the songs, but they do sound a little different, more fresh, more modern, and I think it just sounds more like what we sound like live now too.
So, speaking of some of your music, people who are familiar with Lonestar's music, I think Amazed was the one that kind of shot you to stardom.
Yeah.
But do you personally have a favorite?
And they're all favorites on different days. You know, like some days Amaze just really hits me on stage, or some days it's Walking in Memphis that we do that. But it's not one of the greatest hits, but that's one of my favorite songs to play live. What About Now and Front Porch Looking In, those are always going to be some of my favorites. And it's always for different reasons. Like on the new record, there's a couple songs that maybe weren't my favorite before, but knowing how we recorded it and not being a guitar player, I always kind of focus on my own parts. But there's the solo on Front Porch Looking In that I did. To me, it's so much better than the one I did on the original record, many years ago. So that one, anytime we get to that part of the show, I always look forward to playing that solo. And same thing with the song Tell Her. So we had the song Tell Her on the Lonely Girl album, and it went to number one. But after we released Tell Her to radio, the label decided they want an AC or pop version mix of it. So they kind of created this other mix, and it had this kind of violin signature part in the beginning of it. And I started playing that part from that mix live during our show. We kind of just changed the song up. So the version that we have of Tell Her now is kind of how we've been playing it for years, with me playing this kind of minor key violin kind of part. So, it's always little things like that. So now Tell Her, has this big long outro solo because that's the way we did it live. So it's just, those are some of my high points in the show.
I see. Well, very cool.
It's all about me. I don't know if you know this or not. That's all about the guitar.
That's great.
Not really.
In fact, I do want to talk about, you specifically, how you got started and what drew you to this business. But I was interested. Let's go back to the beginning. Lonestar, the group, was formed was it 93?
End of 92, first of 93. Yeah, we were kind of talking about it and meeting each other at the end of 92, and then we kind of first started playing together in 93, I think.
And I think the name of the band, which I didn't know this, people automatically assume it's called Lonestar because it was formed in Texas.
Correct. We were all from Texas, but most of us met in Tennessee. I had met Richie in Texas briefly, and I'd met Dean in Texas briefly, but we really kind of put the band together in Tennessee. I'd never met John, and our original drummer was actually someone that I played together with in Tennessee before we moved. But so yeah, we were from Texas and lived in Tennessee. So Dean had the idea to come up with Texas C. So it was Texas and Tennessee kind of shoved together. And that was funny because most of our gigs, we were basically going back and forth between Texas and Tennessee. So, and then we started doing road dates in St. Louis and Reno, Canada. We were just kind of going all over. But Texas, he stuck with us for about 2.5, 3 years.
And then what was the thing that prompted the change to Lonestar?
Well, we got some interest from record companies. We did a bunch of showcases for record labels in town, and B&A Records was interested in us, so they came to see us at the Waldorf Saloon, where we were kind of a house band there for a little bit. And they took us back in the backstage and said, hey, B&A Records would like to sign you, but we got to change your name because it was just too confusing and too hard to say, and they have to explain it every time. So we spent a couple weeks trying to figure out what to call ourselves. And because Texas C kind of fit, because, it told the story of where we came from and where we are. But I guess one of our producers named Don Cook on our first 2 albums, he was talking to a songwriter friend of his named Costas, and Costas said, well, they're all from Texas, just call them Lonestar. And we're like, that's too easy. That can't be possible, But then we did some searching. There was like maybe a couple small bands that had it, but we just kind of worked it out legally so we had the rights to the name, and we became Lonestar. And it still made sense. It kind of brought the Texas C bit back in because we're all from Texas, but that's where the name came from. And
the group has gone through several lead vocalists over the years. John Rich was the original one.
Well, that's the kind of weird thing. We've always kind of been a democratic kind of band. When we were playing clubs and bars, we had to play 4 sets a night, 4 and 5 hours a night. And that's just too much for one person to be singing. So we all sang. The drummer sang, I sang 2 songs a set. Dean sang 2 or 3 songs a set. We all just spread it out. But when we started getting record label interest, they wanted to focus on Richie and John. So then we just became Richie and John lead singer, which was fine because I love singing harmony, but I only sang lead, out of, needing to. But so when we got the record deal, it became about Richie and John. And so that our first record, it was split 50-50. And then when we did our next record, it was kind of 50-50 again. But then the label said, no, we really want more Richie songs because we think his voice is more radio friendly. So, and that's one of the reasons that John kind of ended up leaving the band, because he was just getting a little disillusioned with, being pushed further back. Because when you just put a band together, you're basically just saying, okay, you're filling in blanks. I need a drummer, I need a bass player, I need all these different members. And then you put them in a room, and then you have to figure out how to get along. So John, I think he really wanted to be a singer, and Richie wanted to be the lead singer, and it just kind of created the conflict. And that was kind of at the end of our second album span, that time period. John was just getting a little unhappy, and it just kind of, we said, he was about almost 10 years younger than everybody else in the band too. So it just seemed like, you're young, you can do whatever you want to do. You have your whole thing, and we don't want to hold you back. We don't want to just make you sit in the back and be a bass player, because he's way too talented for that. We knew that, and we knew he wasn't going to be happy doing that. So we just had to sit down with him and say, hey, we think you'd be happier going on your own thing, and we'll figure out a way to make it work. So that's what happened. And then Richie was our lead singer for a while. But it's always been about the band for us. So when people leave or whatever, we still, Dean and Keach and I have been tight for 30 years now. And so anytime that happens, your initial thought is, oh no, we're done. But then we start thinking, no, we did this one show one time. Richie was having neck surgery, and he thought he was going to be able to make the next show after his surgery, and he wasn't. But we didn't know it. We'd already driven all the way down to Texas to play the show. And it was a fundraiser for this, I forget which charity now, but it was us and Josh Grayson. And we found out when we landed in Houston that Richie wasn't going to be able to make it. We're like, oh, great. Now, what are we going to do? We don't want to let this charity down. So we're actually in the airport talking to Josh Grayson. And he said, well, I know all your songs if you want me to just come up and do some. So we did. So we had Josh Grayson just fill in for Richie for that one show. And it was like literally the day of the show, we're rehearsing songs with them in it. And we did it because we didn't want to not, do something for the charity. So once we did that show, we realized, it's about the songs. Richie's a great singer, and we're proud of everything we did with them. But at the end of the day, it's always about the songs. People want to hear Amaze. People want to hear I'm Already There. And, I don't want to have to look for a new career just because one guy decides he wants to do something different. Nor should I. And nor should, if I left the band, I don't expect the whole band to quit. So And then you can look through all of history, look at Fleetwood Mac and Van Halen and all these different people that have switched lead singers, and it's always just about the songs, you know. So we just, I don't know if it's stubbornness or, you know, just we don't want to get real jobs or what, but anytime we're faced with an adversity of somebody leaving, I feel like we always come out this much better. And I feel like that's what's happened now with Drew joining the band. You know, I've been a fan of his for 30 years. We grew up in Texas, not far from each other. We had a lot of the same friends. We started playing country music in Waco at the same time, roughly. I knew of him. We were in kind of rival bands at the time, but, you know, I was always a fan of his. So when we got the opportunity to have him audition for us, it was like, holy cow, that would be amazing. And it just worked out. And honestly, this is, to me, one of my favorite versions of Lonestar that we've had. And we've had Richie, John, Cody Collins, you know. I think Drew's this, I'm just really happy with where we're at now.
Because you're kind of the supporting player in the band here, people may not be as familiar with you and your story. How did you become interested in pursuing a music career?
Well, I grew up thinking that playing music was something that was totally unattainable. You know, it was like winning the lottery or something, because I just grew up in a little small town in Texas, and I loved music, loved playing guitar, but everything was so far away. Nashville was far away, LA was far away, New York was far away. So you just feel really isolated when you're in a little part of rural Texas, you know. And I don't say rural, I was outside of Fort Worth, but the little town I lived in felt very rural. It just felt like it was all just unattainable and so far away. And then I was going to college, trying to make my parents proud, you know, like all kids do. And I did really well in high school, and they just expected me to go to college. So I started going to college. I think deep down, I always just wanted to play music, but it didn't. My parents were very blue collar, and I just wanted to make them proud and support myself and all that. So I kept trying to go to college. But at the same time I was going to college, I'd find little bands to play with. And one of those bands, little garage bands I played with, some of those players ended up moving to Waco and playing in a band out of there. And I'd moved to Austin to go to college at the University of Texas to be a pharmacist, because I was working in drugstores, and they talked me into being a pharmacist, since I was working in drugstores anyway.
Oh, no kidding.
So, and then my buddy that had moved to Waco said, "Hey, we need a guitar player. Would you be interested?" And it was right about that time I was like, I just don't know if I was kind of struggling a little more in school than I thought I would. So I thought, I'm going to take a break from college for a minute and go to see if I can play music. Because he was telling me, like, look, we can make a living. You know, you don't have to, it's not like you have to have 3 jobs and play music. We can make a living. We're doing it right now. So I was like, well, I'll try it. And so that's really what I wanted to do anyway, was play music for a living. So I left college, left my job, and started playing music in Waco, Texas. And that's where Drew was in this band called Sons of the Desert. And I was in this band called Santa Fe with Daryl Dodd, Jeff McMahon, and all these guys. So we just started playing, and then we started traveling up to Canada to do Calgary Stampede and stuff like that. But we played mostly around Texas. So that's how I got into playing country music, because I was always a rocker and a blues player. You know, I loved Van Halen. I liked playing blues. When I moved to Austin, I would play in little blues pickup bands and stuff. Never that great at blues, but still love it. Stevie Ray Vaughan was my hero of all time. So,
so yeah, okay. I was going to ask you, who was your favorite artist or band at the time?
Well, when I was in high school, Van Halen was like the biggest band in the world. I was a huge fan of Van Halen. So, and as a guitar player, he's a magician on a guitar. So you can't not like Van Halen. But I got into Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits pretty young. So that was one of my first garage band things. I knew all the licks on Sultans of Swing. So anytime I'd get with the garage band, I would start playing it, and it was always fun. So my top 3 are Van Halen, Mark Knopfler, and then Stevie Ray Vaughan. When I heard him, I had a high school biology teacher. He knew that I played guitar. This was when I was 9th, 10th grade. And he kept telling me about this guitar player that he would go see. He goes, you got to see him one day. You got to go see him. His name's Stevie Ray Vaughan. He plays down at Sam's Truck Stop over in Dallas, And because Stevie Ray Vaughan hadn't made it yet. He was just a bar guy. And so anyway, I'd heard of him when I was in high school. And then once I finally got a chance to see him, I was like, I got it. And that was it. He was my hero after that. Wow. And the sad thing is, the year I started playing country music was 1990. I'd moved from Austin to Waco, and I was sitting in a restaurant eating lunch, and that's when I heard that Stevie Ray Vaughan's helicopter had crashed. So it was weird. Like, the year I joined, it was the year he died, or the year I started playing music for a living. So it was just kind of very weird, because he was kind of the one that inspired me to do it. And then as soon as I started doing it, he passed away.
You hinted at this earlier, kind of how you guys came together to form Lonestar, but and I guess, do you want to talk about how you guys initially crossed paths and met up with each other?
Funny story. Well, it was all someone that knew someone else. So like I knew Keach because I played with him in Canyon. So I'm the one that kind of brought Keach to the band. Dean. Dean was kind of the hub of the wheel. We call him the hub of the wheel. Dean knew everybody. He knew Richie because he auditioned for an Opryland job. So Opryland was this theme park in Nashville, and for 20 years they just did all these country music shows and all this stuff. They had singing and dancing shows and everything, and they would go around the country to find talent. So they went to Dallas Fort Worth area and did auditions for people, singers and dancers that wanted to be on a show in Opryland. So Richie had auditioned for that, and Dean had auditioned for that, and they met at their audition in Dallas. And Dean got the gig, and Richie didn't. He didn't get a call back. So Dean moved to Nashville and started working at Opryland, singing and dancing in their shows and stuff. And then I guess a couple years later, Richie had moved to Nashville to become a songwriter, and he was in Opryland and saw Dean, and they started talking, and they said, "Hey, we should go do something, play together." So they ended up wanting to put a duo together, and then Dean said, "Why don't we just make it a band?" My friend Mike Tucker is the drummer. He was playing drums in this group called Canyon, and they just broke up or split up. So he's available. And I know another guy named John Ritz that I worked with at Opryland that he sang in the shows out there. And so John played bass. He didn't even know how to play bass when we started. He was just a natural musician. You put a bass in his hand and he'd say, "Play it," and he would just play it. It was crazy. But he didn't know anything. The first time we ever got together, we were going to do Liza Jane, and he's like, we're like, "It's in the key of A." He goes, "Where's A?" And so I just played an A chord, and he goes, "Do do 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 do." There it is. Okay, he didn't even know what an A note was on the bass. And Keach the drummer told him, it's like, "Anytime I hit this big round bass drum, that's when you play a note." So he just started watching the bass drum. So every time the bass drum hit, the bass player would play a note. John would play a note. So we literally taught John how to play bass in a day, which is silly because he's just so talented. So anyway, so Dean knew John from Opryland, knew Richie from an Opryland audition, he knew Mike Tucker because they played together in Texas in some band, and then Mike Tucker knew me. So Dean was bringing me a tape. Canyon had just broken up, and I was looking for a gig, but I didn't want to have to get a real job, so I was just getting a part-time job something I could quit and not feel bad. So I was working at Pizza Hut delivering pizzas, and Dean had called me up and said, "Hey, I'm going to bring you this tape of songs to learn." I was like, "Okay, I'll be at this Pizza Hut at whatever." So I had long hair at the time, long curly hair, mullet going. And Dean brought me this tape. And I'm at the register for some reason because somebody said, "Somebody's out there to see you." So I walk out there and he goes, "No, I'm here to see Michael Britt. I've got a tape for him." And I go, "I'm Michael Britt." And he goes, "No, he's got long hair." And I pulled my cap up and all my hair fell out because I had it all kind of tucked up in there. Because back in those days, if you're working in food, you didn't want your hair everywhere. So anyway, he just thought he tells the story like Fabio or something. I take my hat and the slow motion hair just comes flying out of everything. He tells the story much funnier than I do. But so that was the first day I'd ever met Dean. I talked to him on the phone twice, and then he gave me a cassette tape of songs to learn, 5 songs, and then we got together about a week later, and the rest is history. It's so weird. You put random people in a room that barely know each other, and then 30 years later, me and Dean Keach are still together.
With this 30-year background of performing together, do you have a favorite? Do you have a highlight venue you've performed in, or a highlight experience you guys have shared together as a band, on stage or off?
I think the ones that stick with us, I mean, we're always going to remember our fun. We call them grill and chills, where we just hang out and just be around each other, play cornhole, all that stuff. But I think the gigs that are just truly different, that they don't happen very often. We played on the steps of the Capitol on Memorial Day one time. We played on an aircraft carrier with Celine Dion and different people. And then we went over to Iraq, and we're being transported in Black Hawk helicopters to these small operating bases out in the middle of nowhere. And we're just doing acoustic shows out there. It's just, there's been so many really cool experiences that you would never imagine that you'd be doing that we've gotten to do. I mean, just nuts. We're playing in Wembley, not the stadium, but the Wembley Arena with Reba one year. And then the next year we're, in Doha, Qatar, playing for Air Force troops on an Air Force base. I mean, it's just, when you're little kid in Texas growing up, you don't think, oh, I'm going to go to Qatar and play. I'm going to go to Kuwait and play for troops. I'm going to, it's never even in your brain. And then just the fact that we've gotten to do all those really cool things, it's really hard to just pick one, because I could just sit and rattle off a bunch that I just thought were really cool.
Yeah. Is there still one artist or group that you'd love to perform with?
I'm sure there is. I mean, we've done shows with, like, opening up for people or them open up for us for years. Alabama was always a huge influence, and we just got to play a show with them in Florida recently, but we've done many shows with them over the years. We were on the George Strait Music Festival, open for Tim McGraw, Brad Paisley, Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn. Those are some of the big ones. Martina McBride. We've been very fortunate to be able to play with a lot of people, and a lot of people I just think are just really super talented people.
So do you want to give us kind of a preview or an idea of what fans can expect when they see you in Rexburg?
Yeah, I think most fans that come see us, either they're really big Lonestar fans and they know all of our songs, or they just know Amaze that I'm already there and the 3 or 4 big hits. But I think people don't realize how many most of our show are #1 songs, and then the rest of it are either obscure things that we just want to do because it's fun, or just different things, or they're still top 10 songs. So I think most people are like surprised when we start a song, like, oh, they do that song too. They do that song. So I think when people come out, they're going to hear a lot of songs that they know, very few that they don't know or have never heard, if any. And then we just like having fun. We're at the point in our careers where we go out on the road because we like it and we enjoy it, and we like being together and playing music, because that's when you find a passion in life of something you want to do, you just want to keep doing it. You never want to stop it. That's why you see football players, when they retire, they're just bawling, because this is what they've worked for all these years, and we're not to the point where we want to stop doing it yet.